Dr. Crystal began his career as a surgeon in the UK at University College Hospital, London. He specialized in ENT surgery at St. Mary's Hospital, part of Imperial College Healthcare, London. He also has worked at Goldman Sachs, A.T. Kearney, and GE Healthcare. He holds degrees from University College London and London Business School. Dr. Crystal?
Thank you very much, and it's very good to be here, and thank you for the introduction. It saves me at least a little bit of my job. I was going to introduce myself, and as you can say from the accent, not only have I spent a lot of my working career in the UK, but I am actually from the UK. And if you can't understand my accent, it's because I'm actually from Manchester, so we speak slightly differently. But don't hold that against me. So I'm the CEO of LightLake Therapeutics. I'm really excited about what we're doing. Obviously, just make you aware of the safe harbor statement, first of all. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're about, our backgrounds, and then really get stuck into what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. So, give you a summary. Why do I think you should invest in LightLake? What gets me up every day? What keeps me awake at night in terms of what we're doing? Well, we're using a safe approach. We're using a class of drugs called opioid antagonists. And these are drugs that have been out for actually 2 or 3 decades. And when you think about the areas we're trying to address, safety is absolutely paramount. We've got expert management and advisors. My background as an MD, I think, positions me very well in combination with some of my business background. Our CFO's in the audience, Kevin Pollock. Kevin's got a great background combining a JD MBA, a mixture of investment banking and investor background as well. What we're particularly proud of is that we have 2, I would say, spectacular advisors. We have David Kessler. He's the former commissioner of the FDA. He's come on board, and he, as far as I'm aware, doesn't get involved in any of the pharma companies, but he's pretty passionate about what we're trying to achieve, and I'll expand on that. And Mary Pendergast, in fact, the former commissioner of the FDA, also a JD by background and extensive experience at Elan Pharma. Again, she's very involved almost on a day-to-day basis in what we're doing. And again, patented technology. We're using old drugs that have been approved for many decades, but at the same time, we actually reposition those drugs, and we've got some neat patents that really, I think, are very, very interesting when you think about what we're trying to do in addiction. And already we've got some data. So we've got some really good data from our phase 2 study we conducted last year in binge eating disorder. And we're also looking to address another exciting market in opioid abuse, and we believe we'll bring a product to market in the next 12 to 18 months. So some very exciting near-term revenue that we've got here. And then related to all that, not only is this, I guess, a drug development program, but we do have good evidence that this can get to market because there's a compound called nalmefene, which is another of the opioid antagonist drugs. This was licensed by a company called Lundbeck, big Danish biotech company with about $4 or $5 billion of revenue, and they licensed this for $150 million for alcoholism. And the reason that's important is because our former scientific officer, David Sinclair, he was the inventor of this whole paradigm of treatment. And although he never received a penny because he was an academic at the time, it really shows that this works, the approach that we're taking. So really, these are the areas we're trying to address. There's a few more, but I can't really expand on them for confidentiality purposes. And in fact, opioid abuse, although it's the near-term revenue opportunity that we have, I'm going to leave that to the end. And again, I can't expand extensively on what we're doing there. There's confidentiality matters, certainly related to the regulators. But we're excited about it. We're doing a study, we hope, in September, and that's being paid for by the NIH. Binge eating disorder, huge market, we'll expand on that soon. Related to that is bulimia. And amphetamine and cocaine addiction, again, trying to cure these types of addictions is a challenge, but we believe we can get there. We're headquartered in London. Kevin, though, he's based here in Manhattan. We're listed on the bulletin board. Our ticker is LLTP. One thing that's key is that wherever we go, we want to address big markets with unmet needs. And I guess that should be the same for most companies, but it still surprises me how many don't. Opioid abuse, huge market, growing thanks to companies like Purdue and King, who have now been bought out by Pfizer, who market these opioid painkiller drugs. So that's a huge epidemic, and again, we'll talk about that later, but only to say more people die in the US from opioid overdose than from road traffic accidents. Binge eating disorder, officially, if you like, a disease in what's called the DSM. It's what the psychiatrists use to diagnose conditions. Up to 20 million patients in the US meet the criteria for binge eating disorder. And in fact, when you consider in the obese population, up to half of them are binge eaters. And I think that's quite striking. And in fact, it's David Kessler who also supports that notion. He's written a whole book on this area called The End of Overeating. Bulimia, the numbers are pretty high. I didn't think they were so big when I first started looking into this area, but there's up to 4 million patients with the diagnosis, and half don't respond to current treatment. And amphetamine and cocaine addiction, again, the numbers are large. And in all these conditions, the current treatment is very limited, has limited success, and we really believe we can change this. What I feel is exciting is that from next year we ought to have products approved over the next 3 years. So starting with the low-hanging fruit in terms of opioid abuse, but then going into the eating disorders space before trying to enter the, if you like, the cocaine and amphetamine abuse market in 2016. And that's based on really our heritage. I mentioned already our scientific officer. It's an interesting story. He's called David Sinclair. David Sinclair is an American guy. He's retired officially from our company, but still very much involved in a day-to-day basis. And David did his PhD in the US, and then he was passionate about alcohol research. And the place to do alcohol research, and probably still is Finland. The reason being, the government had a state monopoly on alcohol, and all profits from alcohol addiction went back into research. And he pioneered this use of the class of drugs called opioid antagonists for alcohol addiction. And what's really, I think is really cool and very interesting is that you don't tell patients stop drinking. What you do is you tell them to drink as they would normally, but just to take the tablet before they drink. In the case of alcohol, the tablets, the drugs that were used, are ones called naltrexone and nalmefene being Celincro, I mentioned earlier. And what has been demonstrated is that even at 6 months, about 80% of patients are drinking either not at all or at safe levels. And up to 3 years later, well over half of them remain, again, drinking safely or not at all. And the beauty of the treatment, it's not a punishment. So it's not that they have to abstain and then hit the can hard if they do drink again. And it's not an unpleasant drug to take either. So really revolutionary form of treatment in alcohol. David never received a penny for this work, being an academic, therefore patenting the use of the drugs that we're using. He's hoping, again, to at some point cash in on that. I think that's it's his American mindset at heart, with 4 daughters to marry off. So, yeah, we're working on it. So a bit more about the team. I've mentioned my bio and Kevin's bio already. Our chairman, Mike Sinclair, no relation to David Sinclair. He's the founder chairman. He's had a tremendous career both sides of the Atlantic, predominantly in healthcare services and IT, but extremely capable. And again, he's been a very good chairman for the company to date. That's myself, and that's Kevin. And again, we have David Sinclair still very much involved, but not, I guess, officially an employee as the company, as he has retired. He's, as I say, 70 years old. And then Mary Pendergast and David Sinclair, real rock stars that are helping us on the whole regulatory side of things. So let's talk about binge eating disorder. Again, it's a big deal. It's become even more important because it's been officially approved as like a disease in the DSM classification, which is what the psychiatrists can refer to when they're making a diagnosis and treating conditions. We presented our data at the APA, the American Psychiatric Association meeting last month in San Francisco when this was announced. And the nature of the condition is an addictive behavior towards food. I'm going to explain to you why we think that happened, not why we know that happens. And there's increasingly more evidence in the whole notion of food being addictive. And I hate to say this to you before lunch, but it's good data out there now that fatty foods are as addictive, if not more, than cocaine. I am not advocating you have cocaine instead of food for lunch. But nevertheless, the interface with obesity is in many ways obvious, and as the obesity epidemic just continues to railroad, and these numbers, whilst particularly high in the US, the same rates of growth are happening globally, even in the emerging markets. What we know is that as these foods are very addictive, people essentially get a loss of control of eating certain foods. So if you have the extreme diagnosis of binge eating disorder, these guys can put away 20 to 30 Krispy Kreme donuts in a session. They can override the feelings of fullness. So even, I don't believe I have binge eating disorder. For me, if I tried hard to get into 4 Krispy Kreme donuts, I'd probably struggle. I'd feel full. These guys, they don't feel full, they keep going. And there's ongoing cravings as well. And I think really and the feelings are discussed, and putting this together, the main thing to think about, this is not necessarily a weight loss issue. Whilst it's massively prevalent in the obese population, these guys, whilst they would like to lose weight, weight loss isn't the prime concern. The prime concern is to stop that binging behavior. They're not proud of it, they don't enjoy eating. In the same way, if you ask most alcoholics, do you enjoy drinking, maybe on their first drink, but by the time they're on their 4th bottle of wine of the day, they want to stop. And because binge eating disorder features in the DSM, we believe that has highly favorable reimbursement implications. So let me talk to you about how it works. We're using a drug called naloxone. So naloxone has been on the market for a while, and it's known to be a very safe drug, and it's only available at the moment as an injection. So we've patented the use of it as a nasal spray. And what happens normally is when you do ingest foods high in sugar, fat, or salt, you activate the opioid system in the brain, and that results in the release of endorphins. Now, a little bit of endorphins is not a bad thing. Most people almost live the next day because of the excitement of the rush in life, but if they go haywire and out of control, activating the opioid system in the brain, then that fuels addictive behavior. And that's what really happens, and we don't know why certain people more than others, but essentially people binge eat and develop that binge eating behavior. If we can block the opioid system using our drug naloxone, then essentially each time a patient is binging, they don't get that same reinforcement. And what we've observed in our trial, and I'll show you some of the data, is that they lose interest in eating. You don't tell these patients to diet. Again, they find it very hard to diet. They can't abstain from their behavior. And this is what we found in our study. So we did a 6-month randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. And just to show you in our treatment arm, we noticed that there was a 75% reduction in binging by the final week of the study. And we thought that was pretty compelling. And obviously on the back of this, we need to do further work. But really, that's only half the story. What's important in this situation is that the patients we're treating are typically young women, and therefore safety is of paramount concern, and we didn't have any serious adverse events. Secondly, compliance. These patients are desperate to get better. So when we put advertising out in Helsinki to recruit for the trial, we needed 150 patients. We put a little advert in a Helsinki or even a national magazine, and 900 people applied for participation in the trial. And finally, and where we need to explore further, is that our treatment also seems most potent for those patients who have the highest BMI, so the severely, the extreme obese. So going forward, again, we do need to engage formally with the FDA, but I do feel that having David Kessler and Mary Pendergast on board, that's as good as it gets as a proxy for the FDA. Because the reason being, up until now, because binge eating disorder hasn't been a disease, it's difficult to know what the regulators will demand in terms of endpoints. But we're pretty comfortable with this plan for the time being. We will need to do another study in the US. What's that? 3 minutes. Okay, great. And then that's going to take 6 to 9 months, 200 patients, and then a phase 3, 700 to 800 patients in 12 months. I'm going to move over. I'll talk to this about later in questions if we need to. Just to say, ultimately, we see this as an over-the-counter product with the initial entry point into the eating disorder specialists amongst the psychiatry community. Shire being when I say competition, it's important that Shire are committed to binge eating disorder. They market Vyvanse for ADHD. They believe if that gets approved for binge eating disorder, it'll deliver $750 million of revenue. Bulimia is interesting for us because it's very similar, except they purge as well as binge, and using a nasal spray is important because then they can't bring up the medication they've just taken. So again, significant consequences if you don't treat this successfully, and again, I think this is an attractive route to market alongside binge eating. Finally, on opioid abuse, can't tell you much about it. Nevertheless, opioid addiction is a huge issue here. I've mentioned the fact that opioid deaths exceed road traffic accident deaths. And again, 3 million addicts alone in the US. Naloxone was the original approval as an injection to reverse opioid overdose. We believe our spray, and we're still developing the spray, will be a game changer. And we think we can launch this in 2014. And our study ought to start probably late summer. This first study is funded by the NIH. So just in summary, we're using a safe approach into major markets with significant unmet needs. We've got the right people on board to deliver. We've got the patented technology. We've got some promising data already in our binge eating disorder study. Opioid abuse can bring something to market pretty soon. And the fact that there's related technology that's been commercialized already, I think, demonstrates that there is a good channel to market. So I'll stop there and open for questions.